history of alcohol and drug abuse can be used as a legal defence. This is false.
You're watching The Right Stuff live on 5 with Charlotte Ullenbrook, star of Among the Apes, Anne Diamond, Anton Duvet. Still to come this morning, have you ever considered giving up sex that it might help you find love? 0207 173 5555 is the number for your thoughts and for your experiences. You all right with that one, Anne? Yeah?
No, I've got a guilty secret. It's a wine gum, and I was thinking, can I eat it now? Because Will Matthew asked me this question first. So I'm going to wait till the next break to eat. I love wine.
OK. First, though, is abuse an excuse for bad behaviour? Does acknowledging that you have a drink or drug problem, publicly acknowledging it, make everything OK? Or does it just remove any sense of personal responsibility for your actions? Why are we talking about this? Well, I was shocked, actually, not just by the explosive temper displayed by Big Issue founder John Bird in last night's famous Rich and Homeless, but by how quickly he blamed it all on the fact he was a recovering alcoholic. Now, I can see John's point that he was trying to get across, and I'm not doubting he's had a difficult life, but the speed at which he trotted out the "I've got a drink problem, I was abused as a child" gave the impression that he was the victim there and not the poor celebrities who've been trying to do good work who were on the receiving end of his outburst. Now, we'll get your thoughts on that in just a moment, but John Bird is not even the only fella blaming a booze problem for their actions in today's papers. A lawyer's representing the businessman Alan Stanford, on trial for bribery and fraud totalling £4.5 billion over in the US, has already played the "he has a drink problem" card. There you go, it's in the papers today. And psychologists say addicts who blame their addiction, citing it as an excuse for bad behaviour, are avoiding personal responsibility. And yet, while the law says, as we heard over the break, that a history of abuse is no excuse for criminal behaviour, it can get you a lower sentence. Is that right, Anne?
An abusive childhood or having to deal with terrible problems in your life, it may be a reason for behaving badly, but it's not an excuse. I think it does help to know if somebody's had a terrible time, then you can actually put their behaviour into context. But frankly, you should only have patience with them if they are trying to do something about it themselves. So I say it's good to know as a reason, but it ain't an excuse, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to be responsible for our actions. And, you know...
Would you accept, because I have this suspicion that there is a trend, which I first was aware of in America, in the kind of evangelical church, where people could... cheat, have drink problems, all kinds of problems, become born again, and then everything in their past was kind of absolved. They were absolved of responsibility for it. Anyway.
No, it doesn't. That's the point. It doesn't. You have to take responsibility for your own actions and your own life. You do in the end. But it does help to know the background, because I think some backgrounds can be very, very damaged. You look at Michael Jackson. I wouldn't say that, you know, whatever abusive childhood or lack of childhood he may have had doesn't justify what he was accused of in court, and maybe it was right that ultimately he was taken to court about it, but he was found innocent. And I think but it is interesting to know, because it does start to explain his weird behaviour. So a reason, but not an excuse.
He did make reference to a difficult childhood. I never heard him citing anything as an excuse for any kind of behaviour. So he shouldered his problems rather than put them on other people. Charlotte, what do you make of it?
I think it's very difficult for people who've had a normal, happy childhood to imagine what it could be like to just have a terribly abusive...
Can I just say, I have real problems with the use of the word normal, because I don't know anyone who's normal.
No, and every family is different, but there's some just horrific cases of child abuse, and I think that is bound to affect people in later life and their relationships, and if they find it difficult to talk problems through.
It's just...
I agree, it's no excuse.
When you say, "I'm sorry I was abused as a child," or "I'm sorry I'm an alcoholic," and immediately after doing something awful, why are you saying that? Is it by way of an apology, or is it actually to absolve yourself from responsibility?
Is it, or is it trying to get people to understand, you know, that maybe you still apologise for your behaviour, but you say, you're not saying absolve me, but you're saying try and understand where I'm coming from, that I'm trying to deal with this. I mean, I agree with you, and when people are really trying to cope with their problems and move on, I think we should give them all the support and understanding.
To think of the animal world, I mean, an animal that's damaged in childhood, as it were, you know, is often they're completely beyond help, aren't they? They can't be dealt with.
Yeah,
they're violent, and you can't do anything with an animal that's abused.
And will often be ostracised by
the rest of the
community. Fortunately, we don't do that. But, I mean, I don't think it's ever an excuse. And also, you meet people who've had terrible childhoods.
Who cope and get on with it,
cope and move forward and help other people. And, you know, so
using the Michael Jackson thing again, right? So he talked... he talked briefly, very briefly, about having a difficult childhood. He never ever used it as an excuse. He never trotted out midway through.
He didn't have to,
yeah, but he didn't admit to doing anything wrong. So he just made the reference to the fact that he'd had a bad... But he didn't say, I've abused young children, but that's only because I was abused as a child myself. So there was no... He didn't relate one to the other because he didn't do anything wrong. I have no patience for this, I'm afraid. I'm absolutely the wrong person to speak to about this.
Well, go on, which part?
Well...
Someone who says, I'm sorry,
I have no patience for anybody who does anything to somebody else to make their life uncomfortable or worse for them. I have no right to invade your life in an unpleasant way, either verbally abusing you, physically abusing you, being unpleasant to you, being rude even.
What if you had been abused and that is why...
Completely irrelevant.
Really?
I don't see how it can be irrelevant.
No, because it is. Because I am me. I take control of me. I live in a world...
For yourself.
Yeah, I have a responsibility to myself, and I can't think of anything... How would me being unpleasant to you make me a better person? I know there's people have issues.
Because it's all you know. If you've been abused since
I don't
childhood,
accept that.
it's all you know. You have no moral compass. All you know is the environment you were brought up in, where it was acceptable.
I think that's a cop-out, and I have no acceptance of this, because we live in a world where we do have a moral compass.
And
look
also,
at the world
if it's happened to you, John Bird,
knows.
you know, he's a middle-aged man who has been sober.
This sort of thing about I abuse you because I was an alcoholic. You did that to yourself. Come on. If you can do that to yourself, then you can be responsible on the other side of that.
But it screws you up.
Well, he shouldn't have done it in the first place. He should have more responsibility not to do it, because he has to take responsibility for what he does and not be like that to people. I find it completely... I'd put him in a boat, send him out to the North Sea and leave him there. I can't accept that, and I don't think it sits well in the modern world. I think it's wrong, and I think it's socially wrong, and I think it's morally wrong, and I can't accept it under any circumstances whatsoever.
I mean, I think it's degrees. Sometimes people who have had difficult childhoods or what have you are terribly anxious. Often that comes out as them being quite abrupt, short-tempered with people. Often you find that people who are quite sort of prickly actually are quite shy, a bit, you know,
some people don't know how to be in public, in company, and don't know how to be approachable.
And I think you have to look at degrees.
To me, if he'd said, John Bird, I'm really, really sorry, that was totally out of order. That is totally out of order, I'm really, really sorry, and left it at that, that would do as an apology for me. The objection I had was the justification of... I was abused, I am a recovering alcoholic. All of a sudden, it's like, why are you telling me that? Now you're trying to make out that you're the victim and not the person you just abused. No, it is, because why do you need to... That's a guilt trip. Oh, I'm sorry I shouted you because I was a victim.
Because he was asked, because it's reality television and they would have done a half-hour interview with him afterwards.
The homeless thing, he volunteered, first of all, and he was asked later on, and he trotted out also the child abuse line. I say, if it was just an apology, it's an apology that suffices. The additional information is almost a guilt trip, I think, the others into seeing him as the victim and not themselves.
It's a justification of bad behaviour.
People to understand a little bit where he's coming from and why he's so emotional about it.
The mere fact he was homeless and started the big issue, I think we already know his history. I think that's all we need to know in the context of a show.
Well, I think that's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful...
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. But on top of that, I don't think it's necessary.
I've got to go, because I want to take your calls on this, and time is never long enough. Let's hear your thoughts. Whether abuse is ever an excuse. Kirsty?
Oh, well, Nicola herself is actually a recovering addict, and she's on line 1.
Morning, Nicola.
Good morning.
So, what was your demon?
Mine was drugs and alcohol.
Right.
Everything and anything.
Yeah.
And I am just approaching 3 years clean and sober.
Good for you.
So,
well done.
Thank you. I'm a little bit nervous. So I don't believe that it's ever an excuse. You can't use your alcoholism or your addiction as an excuse for your behaviour.
So you're saying, Nicola, that if you were to have a bit of a scene or to do with somebody in which you were out of order, you wouldn't pipe out at any point?
No, not at all. I'd say that it's just, you know, if I was in the wrong, I'd obviously promptly admit that I was in the wrong. I'd hope to. But I wouldn't say, oh, I did it because it's my reaction, because I'm a recovering alcoholic or because I'm a recovering addict. That's just an excuse, and you hide in that. And that's not, to be honest, that's not what recovery is all about, because you're meant to be learning to be a better person, and you shouldn't. Whatever I did in my active addiction, and I wasn't a nice person in my active addiction, I have to live with that. And I have kind of sought to make amends with people that I did hurt in my active addiction. But I didn't blame the fact that I was a drug addict on that. I blamed it because, you know what, I had choices and I chose to rob people.
I'll tell you what, Nicola, I am surprised by how much what you're saying and what Anton was saying you have in common.
She's a lovely girl. I'm very fond of you, Nicola. Well done to you. I take my hat off to you. Well done.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to wish you all the best as well, with the years to come as well. Bless you, Nicola. Thank you. Let's have another.
Marion is on line 1.
Marion, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I feel extremely emotive about this issue, and I think Anton de Beck has been incredibly self-righteous.
Okay.
And I wish he'd been in care and had 25 placements over a course of 14 years. There are thousands of young people out there that are seriously damaged, children of addicts, abusers, they've been abused. It is a national public tragedy.
Absolutely, but that, Marianne, is not what we're...
That is the question.
Marianne, with the greatest respect, though, that is not what we are talking about. What we are talking about at the moment is whether or not it's acceptable for someone that has been through that kind of abuse to then use it as an excuse.
And what I say to my kids, it is not an excuse for bad behaviour. It is not an excuse, but it is an explanation, and people have to understand that deeply damaged children and young people that are now...
OK, Marianne, so just because I genuinely don't know the answer to this, I'm interested in your views.
Neither do I, sadly.
Well, let's hear the question. You might. That would be that if someone is abused as a young person, and they then make their way through life away from abuse, they make their own way in life, so from the age of 18, 19, 20, or whatever, is there a burden on them to move forward and to sort out and deal with the demons as best they can?
Of course.
Right.
They have to take responsibility. What I'm trying to explain is it's so much more difficult for them to make those choices because they've never had the leading, the parental, the love.
Okay. Marion, you're saying there's a burden on them to move forward as best they can, and that it's extremely difficult. I take that on board. Extremely, extremely difficult. So then we have a situation where an outburst happens. Is it wrong to tell the person, the victim of your anger, of your rage, to then say, I'm sorry, I was abused as a child? Does that not transfer the guilt from you, the abuser, to the person who's on the receiving end?
No, I still feel that young people have to take consequences for their behaviour.
Right, okay.
And most young people, unless they're psychopaths, do know the difference between right and wrong. So they have to take responsibility. What I'm passionate about is the understanding and the lack of support in this country for these seriously damaged young people who need serious care.
Absolutely. And Marion, let's go broader than that. We're not just talking about young people here. We're talking about addicts, alcoholics, drug addicts.
Young people grow up, and the cycle continues.
Absolutely, but we're not just talking about young people. I just want to make that clear, because there's lots of older people out there with their demons.
Young people grow up and become adults.
OK, Marion, I have to say I think you have more in common with Anton than perhaps you...
I think we sort of agree with each other, really. And I have a great deal of gratitude to ladies and people like Marion who do such a fabulous job in bringing these kids up who have been abused. And actually, I can't imagine anything that's worse than that as a child and going into a world and being abused. So Marion is a fabulous woman, and people like Marion do a wonderful job. But you know,
Your point was on the discussion point, which is about...
It's after that. I don't think these kids... But they're obviously in great hands, and they'll probably become rounded people and have a good life.
Here's hoping. Here's hoping.
Here's hoping.
OK, thank you for the thoughts now. It's an interesting discussion. After the ads, our final talking point of the day, of the week, in fact. Would you give up sex to find love? One woman did for a whole year, hoping self-imposed chastity would encourage her to get to know her dates a little better, which would in turn lead to more successful long-term relationships. Interesting thought. Maybe you've tried the same thing. 0207 173 5555 is the number if you have, or indeed if you haven't. Can giving up sex improve your chances of finding true love? Your thoughts next. Don't go away.
According to scientists, women should avoid sex if they want long-lasting love. Is this true or is it false? Find out after the ads.